Hey, it's Joe and Joe from DealerClub, and we're in our new podcast studio here. And for today, we want to talk about why wholesale is the biggest opportunity that's probably sleeping within everyone's dealership. So we've got a bunch of thoughts on this topic. I know every dealer is looking to make more money. Obviously, the days of the pandemic era are 2 years behind us. The easy money has ended, and it's time to get back to work, and it's time to find all those opportunities within your store to maximize. And we love wholesale. That's our area of expertise, and we want to share our thoughts, and hopefully they're good thoughts that help you run your dealership and find more profitability and improve your turn and every good thing that all dealers are looking for. We think there's a lot of opportunity to go and mine in your wholesale department.
Well, and that's, I think you hit the nail right on the head, Joe, in the sense that this is an opportunity that is already at every dealership, right? So, we're not really going to be talking about aged units or, anything like that. Of course, that is a part of wholesale, but really those trades that don't make it to the shop, but still a great car for somebody else, or the car that you just never intend to retail. So I think that's really where we should focus, because there's so much untapped potential there.
Yeah, I mean, you can open the aperture, right? There are dealerships that pass on some cars because they're too far outside the bounds of what that dealership's comfortable. I understand, but there's area there to expand. If someone wants to trade in a motorcycle, some dealerships are just going to say, hey, that's really not our cup of tea. What they're essentially saying is we don't have enough knowledge or insights or confidence that we can get back out of that. So you can increase the aperture and say, hey, we'll take anything. I know there's a lot of dealerships that do that, but there's plenty more that could do more of that. The other thing we probably go deeper on is just talking about how to extract more value in your wholesale process, how to unlock more dollars, how to get a premium for these cars. Our shtick at DealerClub is we believe tremendously in the reputation of the sellers, and the buyers. But if we're really talking about the sellers in this situation, how a better reputation when you're representing those cars in a marketplace, how that translates into real dollars for that seller.
Well, absolutely. And I think, just kind of circling back on some of those cars that you maybe, wouldn't normally touch, it goes through the shop and it needs a little bit more work than you had expected. There is still a fine line when it's already on the lift in the shop. The tech's asking, do you want me to do this work or not? Service manager's at your desk, you're holding the RO and you're making that decision. Is this something I'm going to retail or is this something I'm going to wholesale? Well, the interesting thing is you can do a little bit of that work and still build value in the car and wholesale the car and make money.
Yeah.
So if your bill to retail the car is $2,800 and you say, well, maybe I don't put brakes on it to wholesale it, but I do X, Y, or Z to increase value in the vehicle, and it costs me $1,000 of the $2,800, but you're able to pick up an extra $1,500 in wholesale by doing that, it's worth it every time.
Yeah, it should be, right? Unless that lift is too valuable for another retail, service type job. But this goes back to, and I don't want to get too distracted here, but setting up a car for wholesale or the used car department, in our way of thinking, definitely in my way of thinking, should be different than setting it up for a retail customer who's having service work performed. I think they're two totally different streams of work. They should be separated. It should be a different thought process and different prices associated with doing those jobs. But you make a really good point, because I remember from my days in retail at new car stores, and it's either, we're going to put $2,800 into it and kind of get, scorched by the service department, right? The used car department is going to get a big bill. Put $2,800, honestly, I'm just using your number, but that's conservative.
Yeah.
But you're either going to put that money, you're going to sink that money into it, or no, the thing's a piece of crap, get it out of here, we're going to wholesale it. But you're right that there's an opportunity in there. It's like, well, wait a minute.
Yep.
We got the thing in the air. What can we do? And this is where a normal retail service shop, probably not.
It's all or nothing, usually.
It's usually all or nothing. And even if you tried to do some lower cost stuff to set it up for wholesale, are they even going to be on board to do that? Maybe, maybe not. But, you know, there's a lot of opportunity there. Simple stuff, right? You have a pickup truck and it's got a really loud exhaust system on it, let's say. Like, is it cracked off after the catalytic converter or something? Like the stuff that I've seen rolling through the auction, right? You've seen it too. It's like, boy, if they just put a new clamp on the thing, you know, and it might be a $3 clamp, or roll the welding cart over and have somebody spend 15 minutes tack welding that exhaust back together, just so it looks like a complete car when it's going through the auction, not sounding 8 times louder and scaring everybody off. These are little things that I think there should be that willingness to lean in and invest a little bit into the wholesale cars, or invest a lot, but invest in general. Be willing to invest. I think so many dealers look at wholesale as problems that they just want to go away.
Well, I agree. I think that, you know, one thing when I was, you know, at the dealership and in that world was service manager would walk up, hand me an RO, go through it. Do I want to retail it? Do I not want to retail it? If I'm going to wholesale it, what should I do to it? And then also what a lot of stores, and we all know people get busy, you know, there's used car managers that are busy, they're working deals, they're looking at trades. So in the downtime though, if you have time to go look at the vehicle while it's on the lift, and I mean, I've asked technicians, can you show me X, Y, or Z that's wrong with the car? How bad is it really?
Right.
Do I really need to fix this? And there's certain things after you look at it, you can make that determination, I won't do that, we're going to retail, or, you know, let's do that, it's going to build value in it wholesale, and I'm going to get my money back plus, you know, X percent more. So I really think that that's just extremely important to focus on, is that interaction between the shop and the front end of the store.
Yeah, and creating alignment there. Because a lot of times I've seen where, and I'm sure you had a good way of going about this, and I certainly tried to too. It didn't always work. I mean, in my dealership, when I had my used car store, like we were fine, right? I was the boss, but my teammates in the shop and in sales, they all knew I was a good car guy, right? I can go wrench on a car, I can put it up on a lift, I know my way around a shop. But in the new car store, if you're wearing the button-down shirt, like, you're not going in the shop, right? And they also don't, it's almost like if you go, well, wait a minute, how bad are those rotors? It's like, well, now you're questioning the service. You don't get to question their authority. And it's like, guys, we should all be aligned here. So that's a major, I think, that's a major opportunity.
That's a cultural, you know, starting from, you know, all aspects of the dealership.
Yeah.
You know, can we all work together towards a common goal instead of working against each other? And, you know, obviously service wants to make the most money, sales wants to make the most money, and there's this constant, you know, battle, when it really should just, I mean, sales is service's number one customer, and that's where a lot of their work comes from.
Right.
So when you think about it that way, just that cultural aspect and really setting it up that way to just work together and come up with the best way that ultimately the dealership makes the most amount of money.
Yeah, and look, I'm all for the dealer principle, the entity itself making the most money, right? And if part of the way that they accomplish that is by billing the parts at you know, at a full price, right? Billing the labor rate at a very full price, but I'm okay with that. That's fine, I guess, you know? And because then you're minimizing the payout from a commission perspective. The tragedy in there, what you want to avoid is you take in a 4-year-old Silverado, and that absolutely is your bread and butter truck, right? But it needs tires and it needs brakes, and let's say it's got a loud aftermarket exhaust on it. And when you go and price all those things out at full cost, maybe it's a $5,000 repair order.
It keeps you from retailing the car, but it definitely would, you know, prevent you from making money in wholesale.
For sure. And I guess the tragedy that I see initially is because that bill comes across to the used car manager, he looks at it and goes, well, I can't absorb a $5,000 service. So then the car gets wholesaled. That Silverado, perfectly good Silverado, gets wholesaled. There is a reality where a used car dealer, a wholesaler, somebody who knows how to shape the vehicle, they put tires on at a much lower price, they get brakes done at a much lower price, and they put a exhaust on at a much lower price. And I have actually seen this happen, so it's not just a fairy tale, but that same dealership will buy that same exact truck back
after someone else
later after someone else reconned it. And it's like, you had every resource available to you. The only thing that got in your own way was like your own process.
Well, and I think the other reason to look at wholesale as such an opportunity is you're the first person to touch the car more often than not. You know, let's go back to kind of the roots of this is a vehicle you took in on trade. You should have bought it for the least amount of money.
Yep.
You know, and been able to negotiate with the retail customer. You have the first opportunity to recon it and increase its value, and subsequently turn that vehicle either retail or wholesale and make money in either of those two worlds.
Yeah.
Because if a wholesaler is buying the car from you, and we have nothing against wholesalers, and also very clear, it's a great model.
Yeah.
Because it works, you know.
Yeah.
When you want to increase the value of a car, but the new car store either doesn't have the capacity or, you know, doesn't want to, if they, going back to that other, you know, model, they don't want to take Mr. and Mrs. Smith's car off the lift because they have a kind of a melded service department in order to kind of sneak a wholesale piece in there. You know, customers' cars come first. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, you've really got to think about, okay, someone's going to make money on this car. If I wholesale it to a wholesaler or I send it to auction, someone's either going to retail it or they're going to re-wholesale the car. How can I be the one that makes at least the most amount of money during that process? And usually it's increasing the value of the car.
Yep. And it's, you know, it's some simple things. It's one is a clean, but everybody knows that. So I don't want to speak overly simple.
Not necessarily. I've seen some pretty dirty cars roll through, you know, the block. So
yeah, you're right.
But a good percentage, you're right. You know, they at least clean them up.
Yeah.
So.
Or the auction will clean them up for them or something. But it also, it goes to the quality of the clean and the presentation. You know, I think there's two major things. The two big P's is pedigree and presentation, right? So pedigree is the seller and the story of that car. What is the pedigree of that car? I mean, he's like a one owner. Think about a dog, right? Think about a dog. So, you know, there are breeders. So what's the pedigree? What's the lineage of that actual dog? Who are its parents, right? What's its bloodline? Okay, that's Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? Was he a engineer and she, you know, led the church choir and the car was super low mileage and they got a stack of service records this thick in it? I want to buy Mr. and Mrs. Smith's car, Mr. and Mrs. Smith's car, right? I want that car.
Yep.
There's perceived added value. Then it goes to, okay, we're going back to the dog example here. You got the bloodline of the dog, and then you've got the reputation of the breeder. Do they run a legitimate facility? You know, are the animals well cared for?
Are they certified?
Are they certified? And yeah, all that stuff. So like, build your pedigree, right? And then it goes to the presentation. And the presentation is it cleaned? You know, does it look the part? Does it look the best that it really can look?
Now on top of it, because I recently saw something and it's just interesting, you know, you have cars, especially in the digital area now, in digital marketplaces, that they're under 2 feet of snow, and it's not necessarily an inspector's fault, you know, for trying to do their best to have to go dig.
They can only take
pictures of, but it's up to the dealership to get these cars ready for when they do arrive, or if they, you know, do end up doing the, you know, themselves.
Yeah.
And make sure there's not an inch of ice or 2 feet of snow on it. You know, make sure the car's represented, whether you have to let it thaw out overnight inside, or you have to just get out there and clean it out like you would a retail piece, if that's your day or the time that you want to, you know, run your wholesale digitally. Then make sure it's cleaned off. Make sure it looks good. Make sure it's presentable. Make sure, again, it's detailed. And then, yeah, I'm sure you'll dig into a little bit more, but the mechanical side of things. Some of these things, that engine accessory noise or that little thing that might prevent somebody from gaining a little bit more confidence in the car, can be fixed for relatively inexpensive.
And if you have the right process in your store,
Exactly.
and if you're willing to lean in and put some energy into wholesale. And again, this goes back to a lot of these dealers are like, oh, it's a wholesale piece, make it go away. And it's like, to me, they're all, if I'm the dealer owner, if I'm the dealer principal, every car is one of my little babies. They all, belong to me. And I personally would be just as happy to make a $2,000 gross on a retail Honda Accord or a wholesale Honda Accord, right? Like, and I'm not trying to say, like, take good retail frontline cars and wholesale them. I am not saying
There's back-end money that comes along with that, so not naive to that fact either.
But there is the same $2,000 to make on a $20,000 Honda Accord that there is on a 160,000 mile 2005 Honda Accord. There is $2,000 on every one of these wholesale cars that's sleeping there for you to get your hands on. And if you don't, someone else is going to.
Well, and I think going back to, usually, and this is just how, in my experience, things have panned out, years and years ago especially, but I've made more money on sub $10,000 cars than I have selling $80,000 to $90,000 cars, because you get the guy or girl that comes in, grinds you up on the $80,000, $90,000 car that you're already maybe, stepped a little too far and got a little bit up over your skis. It's very hard to do that on a $10,000, or less car.
You can only lose so much on a $5,000 car.
Exactly.
You can lose is $5,000.
Exactly. So, when you start, dabbling and looking at it that way, it doesn't really matter if you are going to make the money on an $8,000 car that you're in for $4,000, or an $80,000 car that you're in for $82,000, and now you got to start making some money back on the back end. So it's really just making sure that you are an expert in what you're dealing with. So if you want to make sure that you get the most out of wholesale, and get into this with higher dollar cars, lower dollar cars, you've really got to be an expert and recondition it to what that car is and represent it for what that car is. Does it matter that there's 20 scratches on a 20-year-old car? Maybe not that much. Does it matter if it's an $80,000, 2-year-old car?
Right, that car's the
Absolutely. Yeah. So
I think part of the problem here, and I don't really have a great solution for this, but there is definitely a lack of true used car wholesaler type talent out there. And that's not a knock. That's just a reality of the industry. Like, most of these people, there's no formal training for this. It is very much, you have to go out there week in and week out at multiple auctions a week and get your teeth kicked in and live that life, which I did and you did.
Well, it's that tribal knowledge that you've talked about before.
It's all tribal knowledge. Yeah, there's no place to actually learn this. I mean, we're trying to bring some of this stuff to light on wholesale education and really what it's all about. But if you take a retail service shop manager and say, congratulations, you're in charge of wholesale now, like, they just don't have, it's not to say they can't learn it, but it's different than how they think about and how they should think about retail service work, customers, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I think you and I had this conversation yesterday, but there's a lot of wholesalers out there that, the old adage, the wholesaler's boat is bigger than the new car dealers. But when you take a step back and you look at it, there's a lot of wholesalers that make a lot of money, but they are quiet about it. They're in the shadows.
Yep.
You don't really know about them too much. They live on their cell phone, and they're picking up where dealers are missing profits.
Yep. And they're really the ones that are the best at doing what we're talking about, right? From a presentation standpoint. And some of them get the pedigree. But so this is just as much a conversation for the wholesalers, because not every new car dealer is going to go and pivot and do what I'm suggesting. In fact, I think most of them won't, right? And there's real constraints there. One of the real constraints is if they have a service shop that has 10 lifts in it, then that's what they can do. I mean, unless they're going to go and stand up another facility, and that's going to be the wholesale recon facility, which I'm advocating that they do, but that's not something that, you go and turn on tomorrow.
Yeah.
But that's what a lot of these wholesalers are excellent at is, you know, when I hear these guys, when I hear car dealers, used car dealers say, you know, it's costing them $800 to $1,200 to get a front bumper painted. I'm sorry, guys, you're just doing it wrong. It's $3 If you don't believe me, like, you got to get out there and you got to get good information from people that do have connections and they're moving.
And it's still quality work too. It's not like it's, you know, for great quality.
It's not a spray can.
Yeah.
It's a legitimate, but you have to earn that. You have to earn that discount, and it's through volume. You have a couple different body shops that you work with. You keep feeding them so that their guys at the body shop are never without work. It's not high margin work, but you can get a bumper painted for $300. And if you, like, I don't know what to say. If you don't believe me, like, you got to get out there and really network and work those relationships.
Well, on the wholesale side of things too, you know, it's off-brand, aftermarket, pre-owned parts that they do the job. They're pre-owned cars. So in order to fix a vehicle, I don't want to say on the cheap end, but on a budget, in order to maximize your profit,
you need to.
Exactly. So there's plenty of aftermarket parts out there, used parts. You know, if you're afraid to use a used part for whatever reason, have had bad experiences in the past, it doesn't mean you're going to have a bad experience every time.
Right.
So I think that's really a big part is, and we get, you know, new car stores have to use certain parts, especially on certified vehicles and so on and so forth.
That's not what we're talking about here, though.
Exactly. But what part can I put on this vehicle and do it so it works properly?
Yes.
You know, not anything underhanded, but maximize my profit.
Yep.
You know, what tires can I get at the most economical price? So when they read the tires, it's correct. Now, when we end up, you know, talking about that pedigree, you know, if you put on some better tires, will it matter? In certain auctions, yes. Certain auctions, no. But you just want to maximize your profits and make sure that you bring for future sales the highest quality product that you can week in and week out.
Yep. And reputation in a marketplace is not some new concept. It's just, I think, a little slower to adopt in the wholesale car industry, right?
Digitally, especially.
Digitally, especially because there's so many places that these guys can hide or cut corners. I mean, I've seen so many cars listed on a digital wholesale site where it's backed in a corner against a chain link fence with 3 other cars blocking it in. If I'm a potential bidder looking at that, my confidence that that car is going to run and shift beyond 50 feet down the road is truly, it's very low. And that's, I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart, you want to talk about $2,000, you know, like, available, move the cars out of the way and drive the car and tell me that the thing goes down the road okay or doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that goes back to that methodology of like, oh, these are wholesale problems and just make them go away and just get me close to MMR. Like, who wants close to MMR? I want to look at MMR. I want to look at an auction report and be like, yeah, there's my car that did 11.5 when MMR is 9,500.
And it goes beyond just, you know, framing up the actual car itself, right?
Yep.
Making sure the car is in good condition, clean, presentable, you know, little tire shine, whatever, you know, it photographs well.
Yep.
But then it's, where do you photograph the vehicle? Is it tucked up against a fence in the back of the corner, or is it presented well? You know, does it look like it's ready to sell itself? And then also just the area around it. When we're talking digitally, obviously, in the physical, it's a little bit different, but.
Well, it goes, you know, and go like a layer or two deeper. Does it look like somebody's trying to hide something, or does it look like there's nothing to hide? You put that car in the middle of a blacktop, you know, with some space around it, or in an indoor photo room that's not tiny and crammed in there, but the photographer, the person taking the pictures, the condition report writer can actually get around that car and go, yeah, there's nothing really to hide here.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different than it backed it against the chain link fence with, you know, 6 other cars blocking it in, and the hood's popped and it's got a jumper pack on it. Like, are we trying to? We're destroying the pedigree and presentation of this car.
Yep.
You know, and I think there's a lot of layers to this stuff, and it's just that tribal knowledge that we're trying to shine lights on so that more businesses, more people can benefit from the opportunity that's right in front of everybody's face. It's the pedigree of that car and the presentation of that seller. And so if we talk about the pedigree, it's the pedigree of the car and the pedigree of the seller, really. And so many of these sellers, it's what does a buyer want to know, or what do they, when they think about who's representing that car, they want to think that this person is not going to intentionally hide anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no worse feeling. I remember buying and for me, it was a lot of money at the time. It was a lifted Ford F-350 with a 6-liter engine, and the truck was gorgeous, right? And I probably had a little over 100,000 miles on it. I think I spent like $25,000 on it. I didn't make it 3 miles down the road from that auction, and it was red light because it was over 100. I didn't make it 3 miles down the road before the truck was overheating.
Yeah.
Now, I knew it was a bit of a gamble. It's a 6-liter Ford. It might have been bulletproofed and all redone. It might not have been. But the fact that truck, like, it stood on its tippy toes when it went through the auction block. It was as clean and perfect. It was black with a tan lariat and
Caught your eye and pulled the money, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was gorgeous. But it's like, I'm sitting there on the side of the road, 3 miles from the auction, can't even turn around and get the thing back. And I was proud as a peacock to drive that truck home, fingers crossed. And it's just like, man, but I would never buy a car, truck, anything. I wouldn't buy a sandwich from that seller going forward. So, like, you got me once, but was that really worth it? I don't know. I'm there every single week buying 10 cars. Now you did it,
Yep.
So it's are you going to take advantage of me, or are you going to be honest with me? And it's the other thing is, are you showing up to sell your cars, or are you showing up to parade them through week after week, and you don't really, they don't care if it sells.
Yep.
But are you serious about selling the metal? And the more the seller leans in and cuts more of those cars loose, the more all their cars bring.
Well, I think to double back to the point you made before was on that Ford, you would never buy another vehicle from that seller again.
Never.
Unless they stood up, did the right thing, and said, I honestly didn't know I had a problem. Yeah, it looked like a clean truck to me. Just give me the keys back.
Right.
And that would flip everything all the way around, go back to reputation. Wow, the guy made it right.
That guy would be a hero in my book.
Exactly.
I don't love what happened, but maybe I could believe his story.
Exactly.
Truthfully, on a truck like that, I would keep it. I would ask for a reasonable amount of compensation. Doing a head gasket job on a diesel engine is not inexpensive, right? But I wouldn't even try and force it back on, because that's the reputation of me too. I'm a big boy. I buy and sell these, diesel trucks, but that's not a coincidence that I made it 3 miles down the road before the thing, let go.
Exactly. And that's the thing. If he caught wind and you didn't make a big stink about it because you said, well, I'm a big boy, I'm going to just, fix it and move on with my life. It's one car. It's not going to tank me. But caught wind and said, oh, well, let me do the right thing. And the guy, like you said, would have been a hero in your book. So it's reputation before, during, and after the sale, in my mind at least. How do you present the cars? How do you interact during sale? Are they for sale?
Yep.
And then do you take care of your customers, even though it's a wholesale marketplace, after the sale?
Yeah. And with something like that too, the thing that keeps going in my mind is like, somebody knew that the head gaskets were shot on that truck, right? And I should have, I did my quick check, right? The coolant tank and the upper driver's side firewall, that was clean, like when the truck drove through the block. I still remember this is literally a decade ago, right?
It's always the ones you can burn down.
Oh boy, yeah.
You remember the most.
But I remember there wasn't the whole spray around the top from around the cap. There was no indication the thing had overheated. And all we, the only other thing we could really do on those 6-liter Fords when the truck's rolling through the block is you pop the hood, and it's got the upper radiator hose. You would squeeze it. And if it squeezed, you were like, okay, it's not overpressurized.
Yep.
There were plenty of them that you would see where the clamp was here and the
bursting hose, yeah.
And you touch it, it'd be hard as a rock. You go, that thing's pressurizing the coolant system, or it's blowing white smoke out of it. If there's coolant in the tank and it doesn't look like it's spraying out of the tank, if the hose looks okay, and if there's no white smoke coming out of the exhaust, that's the best you can do in your 2-minute evaluation of that truck while it's driving through the auction block.
Yep.
But my point about the somebody new is the person that traded that truck in, the Ford dealership that took that truck in, the wholesaler that bought that truck, who brought like somebody along. They probably all knew. And here I am, just the dum-dum on the receiving end. And it's like, I'm not trying to like have a pity party, but that's just not fair. And I don't think it's actually to the benefit.
But going back to what you said before, you understand the business. You're a big boy.
Yep.
You take your lumps when you get them.
Yep.
And it is still a used car. I'm sure it sounds like you ate it. You know what I mean?
So I ate it and sold the truck. Probably made $1,000 when I wanted to make $5,000 on it or whatever. But
yeah.
I don't remember that truck being hard to sell or anything like that. But it was probably in the shop for 2 weeks while we lifted the cab and tore the engine down and did all that torturous work on it. But it just goes back to, and going back to the new car stores. The new car store took that truck in. It's possible they didn't even know something was wrong.
This is very possible. It just went straight to the back, Just put it in the gravel lot.
And they just, Yep. And that's a shame, too, because there's so many missed opportunities. That truck let's say they didn't know. Truck could have been bought for probably $5,000 or $8,000 less from the retail customer if everybody knew that it needed head gaskets. And this is I think, again, we started the podcast by saying we're talking about missing opportunities here. It's funny how if you say certain things, they get interpreted incorrectly. So you mentioned something, I wanted to just follow up on it. When we were starting this off, you said, you can buy, if you're first in line, you're the one buying that trade off the customer, you have the opportunity to own it for the least amount of money. You're right. A lot of new car dealers they'd be allergic to you saying to that because they'd go, oh, no. We step up, we pay the most. That's fine until there's actually concrete things to go and tell Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but your truck needs head gaskets. It won't make it 3 miles down the road. So we're not talking apples to apples. You can't just bring this to like 6 other Ford dealerships or Chevy dealerships and price shop me. The thing's dead on arrival.
And Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they probably know. That's why they're there. So sometimes they don't, but more often than not, what I've found, especially doing the trade walks and all that, and being able to walk around, point things out, discuss things that are going on with the vehicle. And, you can either build a car up, make sure that you're, going to get that trade and get that sale.
Yep.
While also, it's an art, right? While also being able to say, well, the tires, I'm going to have to put 4 new tires on it if I want to retail it. If it has X, Y, or Z wrong with it, cosmetically, we all know that a dent down here is different than a dent on the body line. All of those little things matter. So, right now there's a lot of technology in the industry. I don't know if we want to get into that down that rabbit hole. Maybe that's for a different podcast or something. But it really goes down to that human element of I'm there, I'm walking the car. I know cosmetically, mechanically, and I know my customer too. So I know exactly how they're acting, what their expectations are. Am I a little, small dealer out in the country? Is there another Ford dealership 4 miles down the road from me that they have to pass to get home where they already came from? So there's all these things that and should be able to prime your pump to either take that in for as little as you can or step up and get the sale.
So on that point, again, going back to this concept of like kind of lack of knowledge about wholesale, edgier, trade-in type units. It's just, there's a real lack of that knowledge out there in the industry, in dealerships. And so trade walks are almost a thing of the past. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a tragedy. I love the trade walk. Because to me, what I would do when I do a trade walk, and if I were a new car dealer, I'd be like, this is my new process effective tomorrow. Okay, number one, you need a person that actually knows how to walk a true trade. Mm-hmm. And that's not, and I'm not knocking anybody, but a lot of sales folks, a lot of salespeople, they can sell a finished product. Can they walk a true trade and understand what it's going to take to shape that car for wholesale or retail? Probably not, mm-hmm. for a lot of reasons. But Two simple reasons. Number, like, they didn't get any training on it. The other thing is
no fault of their own.
It's no fault of their own. They're probably great at sales and following up and all that stuff and everything they're supposed to do and logging the stuff on the CRM and following a process. I'm all about it. But they're capable of more. They're capable of learning what a true trade is about. They're also, I think, capable of learning. I'm probably going to rub some people wrong here, but they're capable and deserving of learning about wholesale. And what really agitates me is when I go into these new car stores, really any dealership, and so I'm not trying to just isolate the new car stores and pick on them, but when the salespeople have no visibility into what happens after a trade-in comes in and goes to an auction, what does that even mean? I don't know. I've never seen an auction. I don't know what they do there. I don't know what it looks like. Why withhold that information? And the only reason that I can find, I've been told this, is, well, we don't want that salesperson knowing that we took a trade-in for $12,000 and it did $14,500 because then they're going to want, commission on that $2,500. So maybe not, but I feel like if you don't help that salesperson understand the values of cars and why certain cars command a premium and others, because for everyone that does a $2,500 pop, there's another one that does a $2,500, the other direction. And they should know this stuff. Education is power. Knowledge is power. Lift everybody up in that dealership and teach them all.
Well, I think the other thing too, like here we're talking about wholesale being a profit center, right? Mm-hmm. As it should be. But the best wholesalers take losses, sometimes intentionally, to draw people to their lane.
Absolutely.
So make somebody think you got a good deal, or I stole a car, I gotta be in that lane next week.
If they bring 40 cars to an auction each week,
they're gonna intentionally lose money, or they should.
3 or 4 cars, they're gonna whisper in an auctioneer's ear, sell them all. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because what happens? Everybody looks around. Oh, what's going on in lane 8? It's a freaking zoo over there. I'm walking over there. And then they walk over, you got a bigger audience, and you are off to the races for the remaining 36 cars.
And that's one of the shames, about the digital marketplaces these days. You lose that visibility and the ability as the seller to really draw people in.
Yeah. Based on past performance.
Exactly.
Yep.
Based on past performance, based on, being able to know when are my cars going to run next, and it's all kind of opaque. But
yeah,
but you're right. There are some loss leaders, and there are going to be some cars, no matter how good you are at this, the best of the best, that you just take in the wrong way, or you have to step up. It's the end of the month. You got to make that deal.
Yep.
And you go an extra $2,000 further than you want to, or there's a hidden problem that you just didn't know about, so that's going to creep up on everybody.
Yep.
So to your point, though, it's what I did, and I'd salespeople, rooting for the cars when we would run them digitally,
yep,
to do more, and didn't complain at all about getting paid on it, because
it's a winning team.
At the same time, I wouldn't tell that same person, hey, I got slaughtered on that trade that I took in, so I stepped up on that one for you. You owe me. You got to get me the next one for.
Yeah.
And it was always like, oh man, how bad was it? And because it's give and take, right?
Yep.
So if they know maybe you made $2,000 on a wholesale piece that they're not getting paid on, well, you're not taking money from when you lose $2,500,
right?
So why hide it, right? Like, give them a peek behind the curtain so that they can grow, learn, and eventually, grow in your dealership. They feel like they have more control and that they have more runway. So
yeah, and so going back to like this just kind of overall lack of true wholesale knowledge, you've got the salespeople that are coming up blind to what happens as soon as that car is pointed toward an auction or a wholesaler. Nobody knows nothing. You can't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to ask. That same person becomes a used car manager in 6 years. So now they're a used car manager. They're responsible for wholesale, and they ain't never seen it. And
yep,
that's crazy, I think, right? And because you have to cultivate this stuff. Most people that are wholesalers or used car dealers who actually have the knowledge about how to walk that car, what it's really gonna cost, does that dent? Is that a $85 PDR, or does that have to go to a body shop and it's going to be $800? Those folks, most of them don't want to work, or they just don't really fit, me included, right? In a new car store. we just culturally, whatever, we're too entrepreneurial. We see a $2,500 wholesale pop happen right in front of us, and it's too hard for us to just be like, I got to do this on my own because I know how to make it happen. So it's kind of hard to like cage that person in, and have them work in a new car store, but they can. But going back to the trade walk, I got one more kind of nugget, if you will, and at least I think it's a nugget, and that is every car deserves a trade walk. Every car deserves a test drive, and it's not to go and make Mr. and Mrs. Smith feel like you're scrutinizing my car and trying to devalue. It's the total opposite. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I want to pay you everything I possibly can for this car. So if it drives phenomenally well, and if I look the car over and I go, wow, geez, for a 2008, this thing really is in above average condition. That's what I want to do. And how do you not invest those 10 minutes? Because it's probably a $2,000 difference. It potentially is a $2,000 difference for a 10-minute investment in that car, building credibility with your customer. I mean, I went through this with my dad. He traded in a rough Subaru. And the dealership that he traded it in at, they started at one number. It was meaningfully low. So I just kind of armed him a little bit with what to say. And instantly, they gave him $3,000 more. They still never even really laid eyes on the car. And it's like, man, why not use that opportunity to go and
Explain why you started where you started.
Well, and so here's the other thing I will say about that trade walk is if I were to think about building a process for a dealership doing trade walks, test drive's mandatory, okay? And you go do that trade walk, ideally with the customer, and you actually don't, here's the secret, right? You don't actually even talk about the condition of the car. You build relationship with them while you're going around the car. You ask what they use the car for. You ask why they're trading it in. Maybe do they need a bigger car, a smaller car, their life change, all that stuff. But you're not sitting there nitpicking the car. You're building value with that customer the whole time you're around there. Think about this. This is probably the second most expensive asset that person owns, right? They own a house. They own a car.
And a lot of people are proud of it too. They're proud of the way, even if it might not be in such great condition. They're proud of their car. A lot of them. Some of them don't care at all. And you got to make a friend first.
And most of them know exactly what's wrong with it, anyways. So you spend that time. You schmooze them. You make a friend out of it, because ultimately, in 5 minutes, when you go back to the desk, you've got some news to deliver to them. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, love you. Really want to make this happen for you. We took a look at your car. I had the manager go take it for a quick road test. Here's what they came back and said. And, it is what it is, and it's going to need these couple of things or whatever. But at least now you've got a friend, and you showed that you put your best foot forward and made an investment in trying to maximize on that. But you know exactly who I'm about to talk about here. We're not going to name names, but I know a dealer who just bought, if it's a Kia or a Hyundai SUV, and bought it from a customer and didn't drive it ahead of time, and noticed while driving it that the whole back end of the car was doing this while they were driving on the highway. Couldn't figure it out. Get the car back, look at it, and the subframe, the unibody car, I guess, but like where the rear suspension mounts to what would be the subframe of the car, or the unibody of the car, completely rotten out. The car also had two brand new tires on the back, and this was on the rear of the car, and the front tires were old. So basically, the guy took it to a Firestone or a Pep Boys or whatever, right, and said, "Oh, my left rear tire is wearing super unevenly or whatever." And they probably put it on a lift, and they go, "Buddy, your car's rotted out,
but I'm still selling you tires.
It's trash," right? Well, and the guy, the consumer, was probably smart to go and spend $300, put tires on it, because then it didn't look like a glaring defect, right? If you saw that the cords were showing on the inside of the tire because the tire was sitting like
there was like meat on the outside. Yeah, on the outside.
There was some meat on the outside. Clearly, Houston, we have a problem. Something's not right with this car. Hey, it's got two new brand new back tires, and everything looks okay when the car's parked statically and you're not driving it. I wouldn't know either, unless I crawled in the car or unless I drove the car. Geez, those things happen. So why go in? Here's the point with the $2,000, right? That car, you sit that customer down, he knows exactly what's wrong with his car. Let's say market report on that car is $3,000, okay? You could just give him $3,000. He makes out like the bandit because he knows his car is not worth market. Or you say, Mr. Smith, we love you. We're excited to get you in a new RAV4, CRV, HRV, Ford Escape, whatever. We took a thorough look at your car in an effort to get you the most for it. It turns out the rear unibody subframe is actually rotted on the car. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. We know, right? And it's really kind of an impossible car for us to really resell. And we can give you $1,000 for it, right? It's worth $3,000 if it were a whole car. It's no longer a whole car. That guy is at your dealership to trade in his unsafe end-of-life car.
Yep.
He would take that $1,000 in a second. So that's $2,000 right there in front of a dealer's face, and they're either going to put $3,000 into it because they're not even going to look, right? Nobody should be embarrassed about. I'm not taking a run at the guy offering him $1,000 for his car.
You're taking a risk sometimes.
Taking a risk too, right?
Yeah.
Now, where does that go later in life? Where let's just follow these cars, right? Guy's going to take the $1,000 for it. He doesn't owe anything on it. And I'm not trying to paint some fairy tale story. The car was like an '07, right? And that guy knows he's totally out of options. What's going to happen to that car? It'll get sold at an auction, cheap, right? And somebody will buy it, who will put that car on the lift. They'll cut all that rot out. They'll get a section from another car, and they'll weld that section in. And God bless them. And they'll build that car back into being a $3,000 car that then they can go and retail for, $59.95 or sell on a buy here, pay here lot. And it's totally fine. Not opposed to any of that. That's not bad business. It's not unethical. It's just, I don't expect a new car dealership to go and take on a project like that.
Those are the ones you just have to make sure that you take in right,
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, you think when you sit in the catbird seat like we have, being in the business, being in the auction side of the business, you see so much of these opportunities where the presentation's horrible and could be so much better.
Yeah.
Right. But you got to bring everything together. What does happen too is you get, okay, the presentation score is high, but it's a dealer who's not serious about selling it all. Well, now that doesn't really work because now you just wear out the buyers, right? That's like a dealership who has a bunch of Highline stuff and, the digital auction goes, well, we'll list all your cars for free. And the guy goes, okay, well,
Yeah.
There's a Lamborghini, right there. Sure. Do all the pictures you want on the Huracan and if somebody wants it for retail value, they can buy it for that.
Put my floor retail.
Well, that's a total waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
So, good job on the presentation, but the pedigree, is in the toilet, right? You really got to bring everything together. It's the pedigree of the car, the pedigree of the seller, and the presentation of the car.
And I want to add one more. It's the title. Just because it is, without that, and, we've seen so many things. And this is another way to increase profits with very minimal effort. Sometimes it's just walking upstairs and seeing. If you have the title, it's going to increase the value of the car.
Absolutely.
There is no question about it. As a buyer, I'm reluctant to buy a car that may or may not have a title in 30 days. A lot of times, and there's these, physical or digital players are telling dealers, if you don't know if you have a title or not, just run them all blue light so that way, you're covered. Well, that's an awfully big gap. If you have the title, run it with the car.
You've devalued the car by probably $500 by not building confidence in the buyers.
Especially in this market.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tumultuous market. So when you look at it and you say, well, all right, it's got the title. I know about what the vehicles were worth last month, what they're probably going to be worth next week, next month. But too much further than that, it's all pretty much all over the place. So making sure that you don't leave those opportunities just on the table. If you have it, flaunt it. Like if you have the title, say, hey, this car's got a title, and you're going to get more money.
I think it goes right. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's the whole story of the car, right? Is it a good car? Yeah, it's a great car. Is it a transactable car? Is it a car I can actually sell? Well, we don't actually know. But what does that mean? You know, it goes back to the same thing. Like a seller that possesses a wholesale car, but it doesn't have anyone in their dealership that actually drove that car to, go get a cup of coffee. Like that should be somebody's full-time job in a dealership. Or maybe it's a part-time job within a dealership, but that is, they check out the wholesale cars. They actually know, does the car run in shift, right? Does it have a transactable, transferable title? Because without any of those, if any of those pieces are missing, you have a Swiss cheese story on that car. You got holes in that story. And anytime you have holes, you have lack of buyer confidence. Lack of that just suppresses the price down.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, the pedigree is important. Pedigree of, like I said, seller, buyer, but title is just, it's got to be, it doesn't always have to be there, but if you have it, take the extra couple minutes, whatever you're running that week, and grab the title. And make sure, all right, I'm holding it. I've got the lien release. If I don't have the lien release, is it a credit union that's local that I can walk in and I can grab, the title and just, make it very, very easy to transact. So
yeah, fundamentally, I think this goes back to, and I mean to just like beat a dead horse with the same narrative, but wholesale being viewed as a problem versus being viewed as the biggest opportunity in your dealership right now, right? And I remember from all my days representing the auction, you would go into these dealerships, and unless you started to break down the walls with, the either wholesale director, used car manager, whoever you got the opportunity to talk to, you were instantly met with wholesale. We don't wholesale any cars. We weren't in the wholesale business. We retail our cars. I get it, but can we just have an honest conversation, right? You retail, how many cars do you retail? Let me back up. Like, that's what I would ask. I learned very quickly. You ask how many they retail, and they're proud as peacocks to go and talk. Oh, we retailed 100 cars. Oh, we retailed 200 cars last month between new and you. Hey, that's awesome. I know enough about the industry to know that you then wholesaled 20 to 30% of that number. And I'm not trying to be a smart guy and, figure out your business without you telling me, but that's just the facts. And so to think that there's, on a dealer that will be conservative, a smaller new car store that retails 100 cars total a month, there's 20 to 30 cars that I truly think there's an extra $2,000 on average right there available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just, untapped potential right now. It's whether you're sending them unprepped to the auction without paperwork and running them with cheap mechanical problems to fix. Now, as a buyer, you've got to think the absolute worst case scenario, because if anything is announced or you hear anything that might be a small fix, before you really get your hands on it or get your techs on it or whatever, you have to think the worst case scenario, because if anything is announced, you're not going to be able to, start an arbitration or anything like that on that particular car. So if it's not fixed for maybe and we're talking about obviously small problems here, but if you can fix something for $250 and it could have been a $4,000 problem, and the buyer has to bid accordingly, like it's a $4,000, fix the car for $250. If it's a sensor, if it's whatever it may be.
I think there's really two types of buyers at an auction, right? There's the opportunists that are looking to steal things that are misunderstood, misrepresented, and they have some expert knowledge. And then there's other dealers who just want a simple transaction, and they're willing to pay. Not all buyers want to steal all cars. The only reason they want to steal them is because they've been burned so many times that now it's like an insurance cushion that they need when they go and buy that next car. They go, well, I got burned on the past 3 cars, so now I got to be really careful. They don't want to operate in that state of mind.
No,
they want to just pay for a clean, accurately represented car that they can then go and just put on the lot and sell. So that's one group of dealers. The other group of dealers is they go, hey, I am in the used car reconning business. I internally can paint bumpers for $300. I can, drop a motor in a Chevy Traverse and replace it because the, timing chain went out of it and wiped it out. Like, no problem. I can buy that engine. I got the guys. Hey, fabulous. Those guys are, they're the bottom feeders, and rightly so. They're the ones picking up those edgy opportunities,
and they're putting in the work.
And they're putting in the work and earning their dollars, right? And then they bring those cars back to market as a finished product. But if you're like a buy here, pay here dealership, you're in the financing business, and the vehicle is just the vehicle to attach a loan to. They don't want to do recon. They don't want to do anything. They're willing to pay above market for a car that they can go and put on the front line and sell.
And a lot of times with buy here, pay here too, it only matters if it's mechanically sound. They don't, I've been to buy here, pay here lots, in a previous life visiting and so on, as you obviously you have as well.
Absolutely.
Some of these cars are, I'm like, that's on the front line. There's a hole in the side of the door of the Saturn Ion because there can be.
Well, they're plastic.
Exactly.
Yes.
So literally a hole.
Yeah.
And you're retailing it. Yeah. I don't care what it looks like. Neither do my customers. They need to get from point A to point B, and I'm their way.
They need to get to work so they can make their $80 a week payment.
Yep.
So absolutely. I mean, and there's a varying degree to all these dealerships. That's really the beauty of it. There's buy here, pay here dealerships that do $1,500 cars, and there's buy here, pay here dealerships that do $25,000 cars, and that's okay. It's all fair game. But I just think every time I see these wholesale cars, I get excited because to me it's like there is no other place in a dealership where you can add that much value or unlock that much value with, I think, a relatively small investment in time and effort.
Yeah.
It's right there.
And you already have it. It's not a new vendor that's coming in to do the new next best product and this, that. It's something you already had, you've always had.
Yep.
And you just haven't optimized yet. And it does take some expertise, some experience. You're going to get some bumps and bruises along the way, but you've got to take the chances.
Yeah.
Because if you don't take the chances and learn and really start to perfect in that wholesale process, again, 30% is a large part of your business, and everything with the title is in my inventory.
Yep.
Right? So every car that I've ever transacted, whether I paid $500 and it's going to the junkyard, or I paid $500,000 for it, they're all in my inventory, and they're all, like you said earlier, my children, right? And I love them all the same.
Yep.
So, there's dealers that the bigger risk sometimes, a lot of people look, and even customers have said to me on the retail side years ago, you've got to be making a lot of money on this. They're buying a $90,000 Land Cruiser or whatever they cost at the time. Actually, we're losing money on this thing. What? Well, and they never believe you, so I never really got into that as a negotiating style because I just think it's kind of tacky. But it's true. The more expensive the car, the more money there is to lose, like we talked about earlier. So it's just becoming an expert in making sure that you've got the right vehicle. You know where that vehicle is going to go. So if you have something that's perfect for a buy here, pay here, frame it up for a buy here, pay here. Make sure it's mechanically sound. Don't fix anything cosmetically. Clean it so that they can put it right on their lot if it's something that you don't want to mess with. Now, if you have something that's maybe for a different type of franchise store than you, or maybe an indie, or and you're a franchise store, then you frame it up a little differently. Maybe you do clean it up. You fix the curb wheels. You do some other things to build value in the car that's relatively inexpensive to make it so that they can go ahead and put it on their front line with minimal recon. Because that's what it is. There's also time involved too. So it is, obviously there's a tech shortage. Things sit in the shop for weeks on end at certain dealers because of process, whatever. But you just have to make sure that you're cognizant of time and that you are building value for the dealers that you're selling to.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think about, just any Nissan product between, we'll call it 20 and 5 years old. In a buyer's mind, there is a huge fear that the transmission is bad, right? Rogue, Altima, Sentra, anything. So these are the kind of things. It's like, just go have somebody go drive that car, right? You just took that trade-in. Now, number one, drive it during the trade-in process, for goodness sake.
So you know
What you're buying, right? Talk about a $2,000 swing. But the other is, can you represent that car in the wholesale marketplace and say, we drove this car and the CVT transmission is good?
Yep.
Wow. Talk about, now all these buy here, pay here dealerships that otherwise would be like, I won't touch a Nissan, and rightly so. Why? Because they've been burned on.
Yep.
Invest the time, invest the energy, because if you don't, someone else is going to. And I'm okay with that too. There's a beautiful, landscape of diverse car dealers and this whole trickle down thing. If a new car dealership who has the opportunity but is too busy focused on their new car business, you're not hurting my feelings. It's okay. I'm telling you there's a big opportunity here. If you're too busy running your operation the way you run it, that's okay. Somebody else is going to buy that car, recon it. And so we're just as much talking to that dealer too, is like, hey, I know a lot of wholesalers that don't really shape the cars, don't really clean the cars. They just
play the number game.
And they just kind of play the numbers game. And there's so much there, to be had. And what you're really doing is you're de-risking the experience for that ultimate end user dealer.
Yeah.
And that's where the value creation is.
Yep. No, I completely agree. So, I mean, I think, we've covered a lot. I don't know if you have anything else that you really want to dive into today, or if you just want to leave it at that and we'll kind of pick up on the next one. But
yeah, we can wrap. And I would just say, let us know what you think of the topics and the content, what you want to hear more of, what you want to hear less of, and we'll adjust accordingly. But thanks for listening. And it's Joe and Joe from Dealer Club, and we appreciate you.
Yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one.